Hello, friends, and welcome back to Compelling Stories for a Dinner Party. I'm your host, Christopher James, and tonight we take a look at the fascinating history of animal trials, a weird and archaic legal practice that occurred throughout all of medieval Europe. It's a tale that requires sustenance and a cocktail. So pour yourself a drink and pass the bread basket. Let's get into it. Imagine a world where courtrooms were filled not just with people, but with pigs, rats, and even insects, where the accused standing trial for crimes as serious as murder were sometimes covered in fur or feathers. This isn't the plot of a twisted fairy tale. It's a genuine chapter from European history. Between the 13th and 18th centuries, animals were put on trial in courts of law across the continent, facing charges that would leave us baffled today. These animal trials, as bizarre as they may seem, were conducted with all the seriousness of human legal proceedings. From the initial accusation to the final sentencing, the process mirrored that of a human criminal trial. The practice was born from a unique blend of superstition, religious doctrine, and legal formalism, creating a phenomenon that serves as a strange and fascinating window into the past. In medieval Europe, the lines between the natural and supernatural were often blurred. The medieval mind was steeped in a world where superstition and religion intertwined, shaping daily life and the legal system alike. Animals, far from being mere creatures, were sometimes seen as vessels of the supernatural, possibly influenced or possessed by malevolent forces. This belief was particularly potent when animals acted in ways that harmed humans or disrupted society. The Church, which held significant sway over both the spiritual and judicial aspects of life, viewed these actions as not merely random, but potentially influenced by the devil or other dark forces. The legal system of the time was equally influenced by these beliefs. There was a concept known as legal anthropomorphism, where animals were viewed through a lens of human characteristics and responsibilities. This wasn't just a metaphor. It was a literal interpretation that animals, like humans, could be held accountable for their actions. If a pig attacked a child, it wasn't just an animal acting on instinct. It was seen as a conscious entity that had broken the law. This mindset led to the formal prosecution of animals, treating them as if they had the same moral and legal obligations as humans. The Church played a crucial role in legitimizing these trials. As the moral authority of the time, the Church used these trials as a way to enforce moral order and maintain social control. By putting animals on trial, the Church could demonstrate the omnipresence of sin and the need for constant vigilance against evil, even in the most unlikely places. The trials were not just legal proceedings. They were moral lessons for the community, reinforcing the idea that no being, human or otherwise, was beyond the reach of divine justice. The list of animals that found themselves facing trial was as varied as it was surprising. Among the most common defendants were domestic animals, pigs, cows, horses, and even dogs. These creatures were deeply integrated into daily life, and their proximity to humans made them more likely to be involved in incidents that led to legal action. Pigs, in particular, were frequently brought to trial, often accused of attacking children or adults. These cases were treated with the utmost seriousness, reflecting the view that these animals were not just livestock, but potential perpetrators of heinous crimes. But it wasn't just the larger, more familiar animals that were held accountable. The courts extended their reach to include a range of less common defendants, from rats to insects and even birds. In cases where entire communities suffered from the actions of these creatures, such as crop destruction by locusts or weevils, these animals were brought to trial. The idea was that if these animals could be held responsible, they could also be subject to legal consequences. such as banishment or excommunication, much as a human criminal might be exiled from the community. The charges brought against these animals were as varied as the defendants themselves. Pigs might be accused of manslaughter for attacking a child, while rats could be charged with property damage for ruining a grain store. Insects like weevils or locusts were sometimes put on trial for the large scale destruction of crops, which could lead to famine and widespread suffering. Each case was treated with gravity, as the legal system sought to assign blame and deliver justice in a world where the boundaries between the natural and supernatural were often fluid. The trials of animals were surprisingly formal affairs, conducted with all the pomp and circumstance of a human trial. These proceedings were not hastily arranged spectacles, but carefully structured legal events that adhered to the established judicial process. Animals were treated as defendants, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. They were formally charged, summoned to court, and expected to answer for their alleged crimes. In cases where an animal was unable to attend, such as when the defendant was a swarm of insects, legal arguments were made to excuse their absence or to carry out the trial in absentia. These trials were not only legal necessities, but also public spectacles. Crowds often gathered to witness the proceedings, drawn by the bizarre nature of the events and the moral lessons they were believed to impart. The trials served as a form of public entertainment as well as a tool for reinforcing social norms. The community watched as the legal system grappled with the strange notion of holding animals accountable for their actions, a process that was as much about maintaining order as it was about dispensing justice. In many cases, the accused animals were even assigned legal representation, typically in the form of a court appointed lawyer. These lawyers took their roles seriously, mounting defenses on behalf of their unusual clients. Arguments could range from questioning the fairness of the charges to highlighting the animal's inability to understand human laws. The fact that animals were given a defense highlights the degree to which these trials mirrored human legal proceedings, further blurring the lines between human and animal, between instinct and intent. If found guilty, animals could face severe punishments, often mirroring those imposed on human criminals. Common sentences included execution by hanging, burning, or other forms of public execution. These punishments were carried out with the same level of solemnity and ritual as human executions, serving as both a penalty for the crime and a deterrent to other potential offenders, whether human or animal. The harshness of these sentences reflected the belief that the crime, whether committed by man or beast, was an affront to both the community and the divine order. One of the most famous and well-documented animal trials took place in Falaise, France in 1386. The defendant was a sow, charged with the gruesome killing of a child. This case stands out not only for the nature of the crime, but also for the elaborate manner in which the trial was conducted. The pig was treated with the same severity as a human criminal. It was dressed in human clothes, paraded through the street, and brought before the court to stand trial. The case attracted significant public attention as the townspeople gathered to witness the spectacle. After the trial, the pig was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. The execution was carried out in the town square, with the pig's human-like attire emphasizing the belief that the animal was being punished as if it were a person. In 1519, a group of weevils found themselves the unlikely defendants in a trial in Autun, France. These insects were accused of causing significant damage to the local vineyards, threatening the community's livelihood. The case was extraordinary not only because it involved insects, but also because of the legal proceedings that followed. The weevils were assigned a lawyer who argued in their defense, suggesting that the insects were simply following their natural instincts and questioning whether they could truly be held accountable under human law. Despite these arguments, the court eventually ruled that the weevils should be banished from the vineyards. However, In a peculiar twist, the court also granted them a designated area where they could continue to live and feed without causing further harm to the community. Another notable case took place in 1522, also in Autun, France, involving a group of rats accused of destroying barley crops. This trial is particularly famous for the legal arguments presented by the defense lawyer, who went to great lengths to ensure a fair trial for his rodent clients. When the rats failed to appear in court, the lawyer argued that the summons was unreasonable because it did not guarantee the rats' safe passage to the courthouse. The presence of cats and other predators along the route, he claimed, made it impossible for the rats to attend without risking their lives. This argument highlighted the absurdity of trying animals under human law and underscored the lengths to which the legal system would go to maintain the appearance of fairness, even in such surreal cases. The decline of animal trials in Europe coincided with the rise of rationalism and the Enlightenment in the 18th century. As new philosophical ideas began to spread, emphasizing reason, individual rights, and scientific inquiry, the old superstitions and religious doctrines that had justified animal trials began to lose their grip on society. Rationalism encouraged a more logical and evidence-based approach to the world, leading people to question practices that had previously been taken for granted. The notion that animals could be held legally responsible for their actions began to seem increasingly absurd in a society that was moving towards a more human-centered view of justice. Alongside these philosophical changes came a shift in legal principles. The evolving legal system began to focus more on human responsibility and intent, which made the practice of trying animals under human law increasingly untenable. The concept of mens rea, or the idea that a crime requires a guilty mind or intent, became more central to criminal law. This shift in focus made it difficult to justify the prosecution of animals, which could not possess the moral or legal awareness required to be held accountable under these new standards. As legal systems across Europe became more sophisticated, the practice of animal trials was gradually abandoned. By the 19th century, animal trials had largely disappeared, though occasional instances were still reported. These final cases were often met with public ridicule, as the broader society had moved on from the beliefs that had once justified such practices. The last known animal trials were seen as anachronisms, relics of a bygone era that no longer fit with the modern understanding of justice and legal responsibility. The complete cessation of animal trials marked a significant step in the development of a more rational and humane legal system, one that recognized the clear distinction between human and animal agency. The history of animal trials serves as a reminder of how dramatically societal views and legal practices can change over time. What once seemed reasonable and justifiable, a system where animals could be tried and punished under human law, now appears absurd, a relic of a past era. Yet this history also prompts reflection on the ways in which current practices might one day be viewed through a similar lens. Just as the legal and cultural norms of the past have evolved, so too will those of the present, shaped by the ongoing interplay of culture, belief, and reason. We'd love to know what you think. Did you know about the history of animal trials in medieval Europe? And also, what the actual... Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and while you're there, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to check out the other compelling stories being told on our channel. Well, friends, we have come to the end of another fabulous dinner party. We hope you enjoyed this story tonight, and we hope to see you at the table again next time. Until then, my friends, may your gatherings always be eclectic and your stories compelling. Good night.